Hi grades 3. So today we are going to be learning about Premeter, and I'm going to ask you to grab your workbooks. You're going to open your workbooks to exercise 50. So at the end of the lesson, at the end of this video, you will be working on exercise 50. And the textbook reference which I'm using, so I'm looking at your textbook pages 101 all the way to 104. So in today's lesson, you will be learning about what's a Premeter and how do we measure it, because your workbook exercise, so it looks like this, okay? And they've asked you measure the Premeter of each of the following figures. So you need to measure the Premeter, but before we get there, let us find out, well, what is a Premeter? Your textbook, if you look at page 101, okay, your textbook, it says the Premeter of a figure is the distance around the figure, and that is the definition of what a Premeter is. Okay, so basically the Premeter, so a Premeter, it can be any figure. Okay, it doesn't have to be a square or a triangle, or it can also be a circle, as your workbook shows in figure A. Okay, it's a circle and they're asking you to measure it. Well, Premeter, it is basically the length of the whole shape or the figure, the distance around the entire picture. That's a Premeter. Okay, so right now I am showing you this triangle. So this is page 101 in your textbook, and I'm looking at, and I've put it's actually a string, and I have put it around this triangle. This was to show you your textbook is your workbook is going to ask you to measure these figures and find out their Premeter. Okay, so you can do it in two ways. Okay, you can go around and you can count the squares and you can find out what the Premeter is, because basically imagine there's a bug, it's going around and it's counting all of the squares, okay, all around. The bug starts here and it goes up, 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 around. That's a Premeter, okay? It's basically the distance around the shape. So let's go ahead. First, I'm going to do this one, and then at the end, we will get to this triangle at the top. So this is, and remember, you need to count your corner squares twice because it's 1 centimeter on each side. So 1, 2, so my first square is 1, 2, because it's 1 centimeter on each side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So what's the Premeter of this square? It is 24 centimeters, because remember, look at the top, they've shown you that corner squares, they are 1 centimeter at the top, 1 centimeter on the side. Okay, so that's why we counted them twice. Now so we know that the distance around this entire square is 24 centimeters. Now let's go ahead and count this one. Okay, so I'm looking at page 101. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and sorry, it should be 24. Okay, so both of these figures, even though the square seems smaller, right? But both of these have 24 centimeter. It's 24 centimeters. So the Premeter of both of these figures is 24 centimeters. Now let us look at this one. So I put a tape so you can see better. Basically what I did is, to measure the distance around the figure, I just took a string and I taped it, and then, so it's easier for me to measure it. Okay, so basically this is how you'd measure your workbook figures on page 139. You would take a piece of string You can even take a piece, if you have measuring tape at home, which might make it easier, but use a string and then you're gonna measure the string itself. So I took my string and I went around to measure the distance. Now I'm gonna take it off and I'm gonna show you what's the measurement of this triangle. So let's take it off. I hope I don't rip the book. Okay, so it was this much. Okay, so I'm gonna measure it. I have my ruler here and I'm gonna see how big this is, or how, so here we go, in centimeters. So I have 15 here, and then, sorry, I'll show you better. So I have 15, and then I have over here, so 15, and over here I have I wish I was using a bigger ruler. Wait, let me go grab a bigger one. Okay, here we go. So this is coming up as exactly 24. I'm gonna hold it closer. It's coming up as exactly 24 centimeters. Okay, so that is how you would measure a shape or a figure which is not square, because it's easy to measure. Do you see how easy it is to measure the distance around these figures where we have straight lines? However, imagine if we don't have, even though this is a straight line too, but it's difficult to measure various shapes if they're not exactly square or rectangle. And we also have a circle here. So the way you would measure this one is, again, you would take a piece of string or your measuring tape and you would make a circle out of this. You would go the distance, okay? And you would basically form a circle out of this string. And then you would measure it using your ruler. Does that make sense? So basically, what's a perimeter? It is a distance, so the distance around a shape, and the shape doesn't have to be just square or a rectangle, okay? It can be a circle. So let's go ahead and let us measure. I may not have big enough string for this, okay? But basically, just to show you better and bigger, this is what I would do in my text, in my workbook. I would just go around and I would form a circle. You can tape it, that's why I was using the tape, okay? And then once the circle is formed, all you would need to do is you would need to measure it using your measuring tape or a ruler. Either one would be fine, okay? And grade 3, after this lesson, you will be working on in your workbooks. You'll be working on page 139 and page 140, page 141. Okay, so I'm not done yet. Now the next portion of your exercise, I'm still looking at your exercise 50. The next portion of your exercise is, it's asking you to find the area and the perimeter of these figures. Okay? And again, if you remember from your previous lessons or a few videos ago, we talked about area, and we talked about that area is basically talking about how much space an object is taking or how much space a figure is taking. For example, if I'm looking at the first picture in your workbook, I'm looking at page 140. So what you need to do is, again, do you remember counting your squares? Okay, remember to find the area, we were counting our squares. So that's exactly what you need to do. You will be counting your squares. So at this step, all you need to know is that how much space is this figure taking. So this figure is taking the space, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So the area of A is 10 centimeter square, okay? So that's what you need to write. Find the area and the perimeter of each of the following figures. Okay, and the page, your textbook page, which I am following right now, is page 102. Okay, so I'm looking at page 102, and we talked about how to measure these using a string, a piece of string or measuring tape, and then just the distance around the figure, and then just measuring it with your ruler or a string or a measuring tape. Okay, so that's how we find the perimeter. And we've already talked about the area, how much space is a figure taking, right? So you're going to just count the squares basically, and that's the amount of space it's taking. For the perimeter part, you will actually have to use a piece of string, okay? So you will be using a piece of string because it's saying what's the perimeter of each figure. And you will need to go around, okay? Just like what we did before. You will need to go around and you will need to measure each shape with a piece of string. Does that make sense? So please do not confuse your area with your perimeter. Just because we are counting the squares, that's giving us the area. But the perimeter is the distance around the whole thing. Okay, all the way from here, all the way back again. Does that make sense? Whereas in area, we're just counting how much space is it taking. So space and distance. Perimeter is the distance around the whole thing. Area is the space it's taking. Does that make sense? So for area, we are counting our squares. For perimeter, we are using a piece of string, or even you can use your ruler and you can measure it. Okay, so you can measure so it's 2 centimeters here. It's 5 centimeters here. Again, 2 here and 5 at the top. So that would give us the perimeter of 5 and 5 gives me 10. 2 and 2 gives me 4. So 14. So the perimeter of this shape is 14 centimeter. So you can use your ruler for this one and you can count the squares to find the area. Does that make sense? Okay, now let's move over here. So basically I just told you how to calculate our perimeter, and that is, so they've given you on page 141, they've asked you find the perimeter of each of the following figures. And guess what? If you were really paying close attention to my lesson, you would know what I just did here. I measured all my sides and I added them up. That's exactly what you need to do here to find the perimeter, because we are only finding the distance around the whole thing. And look, here they've done the job for you. They've given you the numbers, and all you need to do is you're going to add these numbers up, and that's going to give you your perimeter. Does that make sense? So let's do one together. So this is 6. This is 6 at the top. So I have 6 on my side, 6 at the top, 5 over here, 2 over here, and 9 over here. And all I'm doing is I am adding all the measurements. I'm adding all my centimeters. And if we add 6 and 6, that should give us 12. Then we add 5 and 2 is 7, and then 9. So all together, it should give us 28 centimeters. Okay, so all I did was I added all of these sides to get my perimeter. Does that make sense? So on this page, this is the only page where you would need to do both area and perimeter. On this one, all you're doing is just perimeter. And again, area is how much space is an object taking. And don't ever think that just because something has a bigger area, it would have a bigger perimeter either. That's not always the case. Okay? So just because an area or a perimeter is bigger doesn't mean that a shape is going to be, if the area is bigger, doesn't mean that the perimeter is going to be bigger either. Okay? So just be careful of that. Otherwise, all you need to know is 2 things. Area is how much space an object takes. Perimeter is the distance around the shape. Okay? On that note, that is your exercise 51. Please make sure you finish it. It's 3 pages, and I will see you in our next lesson. Bye.